Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening.
This past Sunday, we finished our summer 7-day Sesshin. It's a period of intensive training where we begin at 5 o'clock in the morning and engage in zazen and walking, formal meals, work practice, lots of chanting, interview until 9:30 in the evening for 7 days. This Sesshin marks the end of our summer training period. Tonight is the final Tuesday before I take 2 weeks to step down from the so-called mountain seat. I'm going to spend some time with my family and rest and relax so that I can bring my energy back to training with you all. This summer Sesshin was a very powerful one for me. The Sesshin practice that we've had here at Zenwest has been in transition over the past few years. We moved out of using a rented large house on Saturna Island and started having our intensive practice at our home temple in Suk. It's a bit more rough and rugged. People camp during Sesshin, but I think that it really adds a level of, honesty, simplicity to the whole experience. I was reflecting this Sesshin that our Sesshin practice, this word Sesshin means, Ses means gathering together or collecting. Shin is a word that means heart or mind. The practice of Sesshin is to, throughout our lives, in our lives, we're constantly dividing ourselves, dividing our heart, dividing our mind, dividing our energy between more and more things, more and more people, more and more activities, more and more distractions. So Sesshin is a way of returning, gathering together our energy and our hearts and our minds and immersing ourselves in this one fundamental activity, this activity of the cosmos. In a way, it's returning home, returning to the source or the origin. It's a wonderful practice as we take the opportunity to unplug. We actually have a basket that when we come into Sesshin, everyone, I was thinking this year I'm going to ask people to bring their devices to Sesshin because I think it would be very psychologically potent to engage in the act of turning them off and putting them in this basket. letting go of them. This practice is not to be disregarded, and it's not to be belittled, and it's not to be, I think, frankly, it's not to be avoided. All of the activities that we do in this center revolve around this activity of Sesshin, not just our daily meditation practice, which is wonderful. It's a way of decompressing, it's a way of letting go of the day-to-day stress and activity. But this act of Sesshin is a way of deep delving. Each and every one of us, all of the things that we see around us, everyone that we've ever met, every tree that's ever grown, every bird that's ever flown, we all arise from this single unified origin, which in Zen we call mu, shunyata, emptiness. When we're first born, I think that we have a very clear connection. Our awareness of our origin is very clear. As we develop, as we create this thing that we call a self, as we cobble together all of our preferences and aversions and choices into this thing that we call I, we begin to take it more and more as something that's real. The more real, the more fixated we become on this fabrication, this golem of a self, the more we realize there is that stands outside of this thing that we call self. The more we take as being outside of ourselves, the more we take as being separate from us, the more we feel inadequate. The more we feel like we're not enough, the more we feel like we're somehow incomplete. And we can come to meditation and we can read lots of books that say, you're not incomplete. You are complete. You're perfect just as you are. But if we allow ourselves to remain in this world of thoughts and concepts, they're wonderful thoughts and they're wonderful concepts. But as long as we continue to uphold and maintain and strengthen and develop this idea of a self that stands separate, apart from, all of those nice ideas are just words. They're just concepts. And our fundamental worldview, our perspective of life and this world and universe is that we are the thing that's inside and everything else is outside. And how can we help but feel like something is missing? In Sesshin practice, we spend 7 days really investigating and largely deconstructing this notion of this thing called I. And for most people, this sounds like a terrifying process. We've spent all of our lives building it up, clarifying it, defining it, making it unique and special and strong. But in all of that, we must necessarily make it separate. So in Sesshin practice, in this investigation, this constant 24-hour-a-day investigation through Zen practice, little bits and pieces begin to drop away. Sometimes things that we once thought were absolutely critical to being who we are, we realize are just walls, just barriers that we've built up to keep ourselves apart from the rest of this cosmos. Sometimes it falls away in bits and pieces, and sometimes it comes off in great big chunks. The barrier between inside and outside begins to become more and more transparent, more and more supple. And as we continue to engage in this kind of intensive practice, lo and behold, we have glimpses. And even more, we find ourselves immersed in our origin, subject and object unifying, inside and outside becoming one. We find ourselves immersed in our origin, in our true home. I say we find ourselves immersed, but this isn't quite accurate. Because in this experience of unification, there is no I, there is no myself to experience it. The experience is whole and complete, without so much as a mote of dust outside. There's no one to witness it. There's no one to describe it. There's no one to measure it. In Zen, we call this realization or awakening to the origin. But even to call it a name, we have to already have stepped outside of it. When a Buddhist is talking to somebody from another tradition, this experience, this fundamental unification of all things in this vast cosmos is what we might, as Buddhists, describe as God. But again, if we call it God, already it's gone. One way that my teacher used to talk about it was as the manifestation of unconditioned or unconditional love. Another thing he used to say is that in this manifestation of completion, there are no restaurants and there are no bathrooms, so you can't stay. Having returned to our home, returned to our origin, there is nothing other to do than to be born, to arise. This experience of immersion, or this experience of returning to the origin, can last a moment, less than a moment, just a tiny glimpse. Or it can last for some time. But in either case, this is not an intellectual or a conceptual understanding. It is a complete immersion in which subject and object disappear. It's a realization, an awakening, an experience of completeness. And even as we arise into this body, into ourselves, as the whole cosmos arises in distinction, that experience can't be lost. In Sesshin, this experience can happen over and over and over again. And as it does, what seems to happen is that this self that we create, this rigid self that stands as a container or a conglomerate of thoughts and ideas and preferences and memories that we once took as so real, so solid, we begin to realize that it is a skillful means, that it's a tool, that it's a way for us to interact, to meet, to relate to all of the other innumerable things that have arisen in this cosmos from this same origin. We stop taking it as something solid and real, separate. As we look at a tree or at another person, we begin to realize that this person is not separate. This object is not separate. It is also a manifestation of this selfless cosmos, this same origin. These sharp corners, these firm boundaries between inside and outside, I am like this and I like that and I don't like this. Little bit by little bit, they begin to dissolve, they begin to wear away. And more, we become a manifestation of our original nature, which is to say, the nature of all things. Who we are transforms. How we make relationship transforms. How we walk through the world transforms. Actual change. Because this realization isn't based on the idea that we're whole and complete, that we're perfect just as we arise. It doesn't come from the concept that we are already complete. It comes from the experience of completion. It comes from the experience of being unified with all things in this vast cosmos. It comes from the selfless embodiment of unconditional love. You can't think yourself to the manifestation of unconditional love. This comes through the practice, moment to moment, hour to hour, and day to day, of allowing this barrier, allowing this self to dissolve into relationship, to dissolve into activity, to dissolve into the dynamic functioning of the cosmos. Dissolve and arise anew. Dissolve and arise anew. This is the activity of Zen practice. With each breath, with each bow, with each step. Birth and death is the great matter. Thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you all again in a couple of weeks. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen-podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.